People who try to write code which seems clever or which seems like it's doing some mysterious stuff is often a sign of a bad code and a bad programmer. SQL databases would perform much better than NoSQL. In this video, I'm going to share my 5 learnings as a software developer, which I have learned over the last 6, 7, 8 years of working with code, with so many programming languages, so many frameworks, and so many technologies. Also, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and like the video to receive daily updates on programming content released on codedamn. This video is a part of codedamm's t-shirt giveaway program for the month. If you want to take part and win an amazing codedammn t-shirt, all you have to do is leave a comment on this video about what you think, and that's it, you are eligible. If your comment gets a heart from codedammn, you will win a t-shirt for absolutely free. My first learning as a developer is that typed languages are always better than dynamic languages. Now, even if you take example of JavaScript versus TypeScript, I heavily believe after working for so many years with JavaScript and years with TypeScript as well, that TypeScript is a superior alternative. Sure, it has that learning curve where you have to write types and do a lot of checks, but if you're working on a medium to large size project, especially with teams, it will be very, very useful to have a type system in place. Similarly, for other languages like Golang or even C++, as a matter of fact, the more types you have, the more restrict you can have in terms of how well your program can be maintained compared to dynamic type languages. I used to enjoy and work with JavaScript and Python and things like these a lot, but that mindset has changed over the time because of the discipline you get with the typed languages. My second learning as a developer is don't try to solve a solved problem. For example, in one of the last videos, we took a look at how you can create a AWS-like pipeline, which would be linked as a card somewhere here. That is fine in order to learn how to do that, but it's almost always a better idea to go ahead and use a solution like Mux.in or Cloudflare Stream if you're building a pipeline, if you are running it on a small scale where you can afford the cost, or you don't have a lot of traffic or specific use case coming in. For example, if you take a look at that video, you're going to see that involves a lot of components to make it scalable and robust, and making sure nothing goes down and so on and so forth. And it's usually not a good deal compared to what you would get if you just use a built solution for that, right? Similar thing exists for open source software. A lot of time we as a developer get stuck on the fact that, hey, I'm not able to code that solution, I want to code my own solution, whereas there might be a simpler solution existing out there as an open source package. So don't try to reinvent the wheel as developers, especially when you're working on a startup or a business or a small scale project which you want to hit under a deadline. It is important to stand on the shoulders of the giant, right? For learning part, I do believe that it is good if you just go out and experiment building your own stuff. But for the most part, I do believe, software mostly has been built in this following way, right? Nobody really builds everything from scratch. Otherwise, you would probably have to start from hardware again. So yeah, you should just try to go ahead and focus on what your software does uniquely compared to building a lot of non-essential parts which are already built for you. My third learning is that people who try to write code which seems clever or which seems like it's doing some mysterious stuff is often a sign of a bad code and a bad programmer. Why do I say that? I say that because a lot of time, I would say like almost all the times, you never want a code which appears mysterious, but actually a piece of code which can be read by another human, because chances are that would happen eventually, right? If your product gets famous or you want to work on some refactoring part or anything, clever code is not gonna help you. Those ternary operators and those fumbled syntax and shortcuts which you're taking in the code, that might be good for the computer, or the computer might not even care, but people who are maintaining your code will most likely just have a bad time maintaining that code. So as a developer, that is one of the reasons I don't even like competitive coding, because that teaches you a lot of such practices where you have to, not exactly teaches you, but it's more like a convention in a competitive coding space. So that mindset takes time to change, right? So you don't want to be writing that sort of syntax where everything is jumbled, you're writing one-letter variable names, you're assigning them, you're using shortcuts to write code. Real world code is massively different, and needs to be massively different in order to be maintained and scaled properly by a lot of people together. My fourth important learning which I have seen is that if you're building real world applications, in a lot of cases, if they are even moderately complex, you're going to see that there is a lot of relation between the data, right? And relational data is best suited for RDBMS like MySQL or Postgres, or basically these SQL databases. MongoDB, although we at codedamn also use MongoDB, but I have realized that usually in general, SQL databases would perform much better than NoSQL for managing and maintaining this data for a number of reasons. One of them being that relational data, which is the real world data, is easily mapped into databases like MySQL or Postgres. MongoDB, on the other hand, follows the NoSQL ones follow. They do have the ability to have relations, but it seems like fake, right? Because eventually you would have to perform a second query, or you would have to do an aggregation to perform a lookup anyway. So, and plus these databases work and operate best if the data is not relational. That means NoSQL would work best if the data is not relational. So yeah, I mean, either if you're able to structure your data in the following way, then that's great. But I have seen that a lot of data, in fact, is relational. So you would have connections between different collections and different documents and so on and so forth. And for those, I would say, like, using an RDBMS makes much more sense compared to a NoSQL database. And my fifth point, which kind of like overrules all the other four which I mentioned, is that there is usually no one right way to do a certain thing. Take an example of OOP, object-oriented programming, which is a very widely taught topic in universities, schools, and so on. Now, OOP is fine as a programming paradigm, but to be honest, it's not as popular as you would, think it is, especially if you're working with things like JavaScript and TypeScript and stuff like this on the back end. Sure, it has a concept of classes, JavaScript, even languages like JavaScript has a concept of classes and so on, but at least what I have seen in codedamn and the way we have structured it and what I have seen in other code bases, I mean, JavaScript is not even an object-oriented language, it's a prototypal-based inheritance language. So there is no one right and wrong way to do things as long as you are able to follow some of the best practices. Again, this could be another point that all best practices are not best practices, and if you're following them all, you're doing something wrong. Follow some of the best practices of the ecosystem, but understand that it varies a lot from ecosystem to ecosystem in the place in the tech stack which you're choosing, the technologies which you're building for. So these were my top 5 general understandings which I could think of from the last few years. What do you think about them? Do you have something you want to share as an experience with others? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon in order to keep receiving the updates. That is all for this one. I'm gonna see you in the next video really soon.